had a rather lengthened NCOP where the National Council of Provinces was really taking parliament to the people of Ekurhuleni and Gauteng, so that's what delayed us. We apologize for that. Today I'm announcing a number of changes to the National Executive, the Cabinet. Now, these changes are occasioned by the untimely passing of Minister Edna Molewa, as well as the resignation of Minister Malusi Gigaba. And in making these changes, I remain determined that the cabinet of our nation should have what I would call an appropriate mix of experience and capability, as well as gender, as well as a generational mix as well. And that it should have members who are committed to serve the people of our country, are mindful of the need to have a resolute and stable cabinet that is able to effectively lead the growth effort that we have embarked upon, the renewal effort, as well as the transformation effort. I've decided to make the following appointments. Minister of Home Affairs will now be Dr. Siyabonga Cwele. Minister of Environmental Affairs will now be Ms. Nomvula Mukonyane. And Minister of Communications will be Ms. Stella Ndabeni Abrahams. Now, I've also decided to merge the Ministries of Communications and Telecommunications and Postal Services into a single ministry under the new Minister of Telecommunications and Communications, Minister Stella Ndabeni Abrahams. This move is going to ensure that we have better alignment and coordination of matters that are critical to the future of our economy, particularly in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the two departments will report to the new ministry, namely the Department of Communications, as well as the Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services. They will remain separate departments until the fifth administration. Now, the decision to merge the two ministries is in line with the work that we have been undertaking, in line with the announcement that I made during the State of the Nation address, that we are going to look at realigning government, and in anticipation of the sixth democratic administration, we will have completed this work, and when we have completed it, and after the elections, we will then be able to have a much more comprehensive announcement on how we will have realigned government. So if you like, the merging of communications and telecommunications and postal services is the first wave, but it is also to help with the realigning process which we need right now in order to put into effect the transformation that we are effecting with regard to the economic management. I wish to announce also the resignation from the National Executive of Deputy Minister of Energy Thembi Majola with effect from the 1st of January 2019 to attend to family commitments. I wish the newly appointed ministers well in undertaking a great responsibility they have to the people of South Africa, and extend my gratitude to all those who have served as ministers, as well as the Deputy Minister Majola, for their contribution to the country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May I invite the Director General, Dr. Cassius Lubisi, to conduct the swearing-in.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will now request Madam Justice Sisi Rampepe and the Minister Designate to come through. Your Excellency, the President, Madam Justice Sisi Rampepe, Minister Designate Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed our privilege once again to welcome you on behalf of the Presidency. Thank you for joining us at short notice. I now, without much further ado, invite His Excellency, President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, to commence with the proceedings. Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Lubisi. In terms of the powers vested in me by Section 91 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, I have decided to appoint Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams as Minister of Communications, as indicated in the signed President's Act. I will now accordingly request the Honorable Justice Kampepe to either swear or affirm her into office. Thank you.
Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, ladies and gentlemen, I will now commence with the swearing-in of the Minister, Ms. Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. Minister Designate, I request you to join me to take the oath or affirmation.
I take the oath. I, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other laws of the Republic, and I undertake to hold my office as Minister with honor and dignity, to be a true and faithful counselor, not to divulge directly or indirectly any secret matter entrusted to me, and to perform the functions of my office conscientiously and to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Please sign the certificate, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Minister, and congratulations.
You're now full minister. Thank you, Justice.
Mr. President, Judge Rampepe, Minister Stella Ndabeni,
Abrahams, we congratulate you on your appointment and wish you much success in your duties to make South Africa and the world a better place for all. Mr. President, we have come to the end of the swearing-in ceremony. We thank you, and we thank Judge Rampepe and the Minister for your presence. We also acknowledge the Minister's partner, Mr. Tato Abrahams, who's here, because sometimes we get forgotten. So we must acknowledge you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We now should, ladies and gentlemen, allow the President, Judge Rampepe, and the Minister to leave. Mr. President, thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings our press briefing to an end, and thank you so very much for your attendance. Once again, apologies for the delay in starting. Thank you.
All right, well, there you have it. President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing some changes, of course, to his cabinet. So let's just recap what the president announced. The Home Affairs Department will now be led by Dr. Siyabonga Cwele, and the former Communications Minister Nomvula Mkonyane now moving to the Department of Environmental Affairs. Of course, that department was occupied by the late Edna Molewa. Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams is now the new Communications Minister, as you may have just seen. She's just been sworn in, of course, as the minister. And of course, the president also announcing that the Department of Communications and Telecommunications and Postal Services will now become one. This, of course, is to better align their plans as government, more so moving into the fourth industrial revolution. All right, so we will give you some political reactions. Of course, our colleagues out in Cape Town will talk to political parties about this particular announcement. Let me just welcome back my guest here in studio, Dumisani Hlope. He, of course, is our SABC political editor. We also have Dr. Mazwe Majola. Welcome back. So it wasn't a major one, as you said to Dumisani before, that he needs to play it very safe. It looks like that is what the president did.
Yes, yeah, I think that's what he did. Two things that he did in particular. One, it has been to play it safe, like we have said. And number two, it has been this, he gave us a hint of the possible restructuring of cabinet post 2019 elections. So all this whole talk about the restructuring of cabinet, now we can safely say that post the election, the cabinet is likely to be shrunk.
Yeah, there's
to be smaller,
but
also not simply shrinking it, but also in the manner that is structured to function systematically, it is likely to change. But I think, thirdly, Palace, I think he has opened himself for some serious criticism by the opposition, because the people that the opposition mainly expect to be moved have not necessarily been moved.
Yeah. But as you said, it's a very difficult one for him because he's got to please the ANC as well.
Yes, he had to strike, that balance. I think the biggest issue that he has probably done is to match the communications portfolio. The
removal of Minister Nomvula Mkonyane from the Communications Department, did you see that one coming?
I didn't see it coming, but obviously she has been struggling in this department. It's a very challenging department, and especially now the president has amalgamated communications, telecommunications and postal services. So she needed, or she wanted, a fresh blood there, someone who will come with positivity and vitality. However, I'm very disappointed. I think the president missed a golden opportunity to bring the whole country into his confidence here. This copy and paste mentality and macroscopic approach, I think really he has failed here, because I thought he will be very strong and courageous and think for the future. I thought now he will be saying, there are people I want to work with post 2019 elections, you know, so that I know that he said obviously he would like to this reshuffle is premised on the mixture or on experience, capability, gender, age.
Most importantly, generational mix. There have been concerns that there aren't, you know, young people within cabinet, and the president, of course, announcing that he's looked into a whole range of issues, as you said, experience, capability, gender, generational mix. Tumisani, we see Stella Ndabeni Abrahams, of course, coming into the cabinet, ones, and she's considered as one of the rising stars within the ANC.
Well, yeah, no, that's true. She is considered one of the rising stars within the ANC, very vibrant and energetic. So I'm sure portfolios such as this one, they do require some bit of, you know, new thinking. But let's not also forget one particular important part. Because in certain instances, we tend to focus so much on the individuals that get appointed and forget about the whole system, you know, of governance. So in this particular case, you still have to ask yourself, regardless of who's being appointed into cabinet, what is the strength of the ANC at an organizational level to ensure that anyone who's put in those positions can perform, and it's held to account for one's performance. And is there some sort of, you know, consequential leadership from the ruling party for non-performance and other problems? And I think when we look into this leadership, it's important also to reflect on to what extent is the mother body positioned and capacitated to hold its deployees accountable.
And many people have always been of the view that communications department and telecommunications and postal services really are, you know, should be combined. The president, of course, announcing that, although we do know that, of course, this will only happen after the 2019 elections. Is this a wise move?
Look,
because you were saying to me, communications department is a very crucial department on its own.
True, but okay, here's the matter. In the recent past, if you look at organizational development, including government, by the way, and the way government is managed and led, many would have argued that you need the areas of specialization, like specific focus. So this is why at some point you could have had all of these related functions being separated simply because someone had made that argument that, you know, you need people who are specialized in specific areas, you know, such as, you know, your postal services, telecommunications, that you needed a specific focus. But in the last 15 years or so to now, governments, how they operate throughout the world, they have changed drastically. Now they talk of integration and coordination. You need to find out in your process of leading a government what is aligned to what and what is integrated to what and how are these functions, you know, organized. So it makes sense for one to integrate these functions, but the question is, are there incentives that are created within that government system to ensure that you have got integrated work? And by the way, one of the challenges that the new minister is going to have with this amalgamated, you know, portfolio is that those that are in the bureaucratic leadership will start to question whether they are coming or going. And that affects how they perform on a day-to-day basis. So she will have to really work hard, you know, to work on the human resource to make sure that they buy into the new vision and they work in a coordinated manner across the various elements of the portfolio.
All right, so she's going to have a lot of convincing to do to the stakeholders. I see you agree with Dumisani on that. Absolutely.
When you take over, especially the officials, there will be a lot of anxiety. They don't know who's going, who's coming, what she's going to do. She's going to bring new people. So the area of human relations will be key here to make sure that she pacifies and calms down the people, because you need performance now. You know, we are going towards the election, so people will be judging ANC, on performance, service delivery. People want to see that people who are placed there are really delivering and also are accountable in what they are doing.
All right.
But sorry to add, this also means that questions can be asked about the separation of the economic portfolio, because you have got the Department of Economic Development, small business as a separate entity, trade and industry. We can keep treasury because those are the custodians. But so if the president is taking this line of merging, you know, departments according to their functions.
So those ones may be next.
Yes, possibly they are likely to be.
Because when we had, of course, those unconfirmed reports that there were departments that were going to be merged, many people were of the view that it will have to be your economic cluster department being merged. But as you said, we may see, of course, a number of departments being merged after the elections next year. So, Minister Siyabonga Gwele, he was, of course, the Minister of Telecommunications and Postal Services. He's now the Minister of Home Affairs. And really, the Department of Home Affairs was starting to sort of shape up, if one can say. So it's going to be a very, should I say, an easy ride for him or a difficult one to take off from where Malusi Gigaba left off?
Well, what is important for any leader whenever he takes over a new department or a new position, a leader must announce himself or herself. You know, a leader must be able to identify those quick wins, the things that he or she will do, so that people can say, wow, here is the leader, here's the person we've been waiting for. So it's going to be very interesting for him to say that when he goes to Home Affairs, what is it that he can identify? Those 3 things or 5 things where he can say, I'm going to focus on this, so that people can say that the eagle has landed, now we are going to see changes or we are going to see things. Secondly, any leader or anyone who takes over from another person will focus on 3 things mainly. We can call it stop, start, and continue. What is it that as I'm taking over here, things that I'm going to cut, I'm going to stop, things that have been happening that are not necessary anymore? And what is it that are things that I need to start, initiate, things that were not there but I need to share so that people can see that at least there are new things that have been initiated, and what are those things that will continue, things that have been implemented and executed and have been doing things very well, working well, but that are need to not to be touched.
All right, I'm not even going to say anything about Batabile Dlamini because both of you had agreed that she wasn't going to go anywhere. So earlier, our reporter Sipho Stierman spoke to the Minister of Women in the Presidency, Batabile Dlamini, of course, ahead of this cabinet reshuffle, and this is what she had to say.
We all know that this is not about us as individuals. So when you are given responsibilities, you must do your best and perform. And when you are called upon to give or to say thank you, you've done your best. It should not bring ill feelings. It's part of government.
And so you would accept whatever outcome?
No, it's not about being accepting whatever outcome. It's about this being the prerogative of the president and the people of South Africa.
And you're not worried?
No, don't ask that question. I have no answer for that question. I can't say so because if I'm saying I'm not worried, what am I saying to the ANC? Because the president is the face of the ANC.
You can't answer that question. It's the prerogative of the president, of course. So your take on that?
Well, look, that's a generic answer for any minister and for any person in the cabinet.
Because he tells people that don't ask me that if I'm worried.
Yeah, but she had answered that. I mean, she was basically saying that she's serving on that's the basic answer that all of them, even Malusi just before he left, he also made a reference to that point. But there was a point that you had raised earlier, Palace, about what is it that Siyabonga Gwele is likely to do. One of the mistakes that most political heads do when they get into a new portfolio is to pretend that things were not happening. And then in the process, they begin to remove, to clean up, to remove certain individuals, and then they go through the strategies that was implemented by the previous person, and yet they come from the same political party. Well, we
heard during the state capture inquiry that some even denied doing the proper handover.
Yeah, so by this time, I think for someone who has been in the cabinet, like Dr. Kweli, who has been in the cabinet for so long, perhaps he will not necessarily do that. My thinking, though, is that he might want to zoom into this issue of the visa regime, particularly when it comes to the parents that are traveling with their kids. I don't think that issue has been resolved completely. And so he's likely to face some serious lobbying and advocacy by the travel industry and the tourism industry, simply because it's an issue that remains unresolved. Yeah. And then also he is an acting DG in that department, so that with the president they might have to finalize that.
All right. Let's now go to Cape Town, to Parliament, where reporter Abra Babia is standing by with some political reaction. Abra, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. What is the mood like, but most importantly, the reaction from political parties?
Hi, well, that's what we're going to find out right now. The bulk of the MPs, leaders of opposition parties, are all still in the House because the National Assembly is sitting. It is still question time to the Deputy President. So we basically are calling them to try to come out of the House when they can. And luckily, we have Reverend Kenneth Meshwe of the ACDP, who did oblige and who came out of the House to come give us his reaction to what just happened a few minutes ago. Reverend, thank you so much for leaving the National Assembly and coming to speak with us. What is your initial reaction to the President's Cabinet reshuffle announcement today?
The initial reaction on behalf of the ACDP is one of disappointment. There is a minister in Cabinet who's facing possible charges of perjury by the name of Batabile Dlamini. We thought the President would want to clear the smoke around this minister by removing her. And also, she has not performed well. We know what SASA, the mess that she left SASA in. So it is the first disappointment. The second disappointment, we have a minister that has been promoted, Nomvula Nkonyane, who now is the Minister of Environmental Affairs. Now, the minister who took over, Nkwinti, who took over from Minister Nkonyane in the Department of Water and Sanitation, says the department was a mess. He used the word mess. So now when you have a minister who has failed in one department and they are promoted or redeployed to another department, I do not know what made the President to think that a person who is incapable will become capable just because they are in another department. So it is a disappointment for us. Now, a plus that we can give the President is that he merged two departments. We have been complaining about a bloated cabinet. So it is a step in the right direction to merge the Department of Communication and also Postal Services. But we are not sure. I'm not sure whether the new minister, Stella Ndabeni Abrahams, is the correct person because of the challenges that, in particular, the Department of Communication is facing. As you know, that the SABC is also in a mess. One would expect somebody who's more experienced, more mature in running a department successfully to be given this very challenging task. But it has been given to somebody who has not improved herself in a department that was failing, and then it turned around. So I'm not sure. We wish she succeeds, but I'm not sure whether she's the right person for the department.
She does, of course, fit the criteria of a generational mix, being one of the younger MPs. Being one of the younger cabinet members.
I agree with that, but she should have been given another department, not this one that has so many challenges. SABC, where are you going to start? you know. She should have been given a department that's easier to handle. I'm not sure which one, but the communications department is one of the most challenging. And postal services. How many people are complaining about letters that have been in the post office for more than 2 years? You know, so there is a mess in this department that she has been given responsibility over, and I'm not sure whether she's going to succeed. If you pray for her, maybe she might.
Reverend, can I ask you to speculate? This wasn't really so much of a cabinet reshuffle. It was just about filling vacancies, essentially. And as you mentioned, you are disappointed because of a specific minister who still remains in the cabinet. You're not the only person who feels that way. If you look at social media, there were people who were drawing up wish lists, if you could call them that. Why do you think the president chose to retain certain people? Do you think he's just acting within his playing field right now?
I think about Bathabile Dlamini, it could be because she's the president of the Women's League. You know that slogan, Tintomfazi, Tintombogot, you know? So women maybe could have been insulted and offended if she was removed. So she's not kept there because of her capabilities, but because the president wants the support of women. And it is unfortunate that wanting to get the support of women has come before proper service delivery to the people. So that's the only reason I can think of why the president could keep Bathabile Dlamini in his cabinet.
Reverend, thank you so much for your time. Well, there you have it. That was Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, President of the ACDP. We are waiting for other MPs and party leaders to be coming to our studio here at the SABC in Parliament to give us their views and reactions on the President's announcement. And as they do arrive, we will be crossing back to you in the studio.
Abra Babia, our reporter live from Parliament, of course, giving us that reaction of political parties. As she said, as soon as she is able to get in touch with more political party leaders, she will definitely get in touch with us. All right, please talk to us about the cabinet reshuffle. What's your take? Were you surprised with the changes? And do you think that the president could have done more? At SA_SABC, we're using the hashtag SABC News. Would love to hear from you. As Sibulele also wrote to us, who said, I'm happy to see young Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams appointed, and the merger of the Department of Communications and Telecommunications. Abiso saying a very important announcement by the minister, but are they going to create jobs? That's the question. All right, many thanks there with your tweets. Keep them coming, as I said, our Twitter handle at SA_SABC. Please use the hashtag SABC News. Now, back to what the ACDP leader, Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, had to say. No surprises, of course, as we said earlier, that all opposition leaders would have wanted to see Minister Bathabile Dlamini gone.
Dr. Majola? Well, yeah, so that was definitely coming. Bathabile has become a deficit for the ANC.
And I suppose that is what we're going to hear from all opposition leaders.
Until the election. Yes. So now this is what Ramaphosa will have to cover and to defend until the election.
Yeah. An important point, I suppose, that he also made is, why would Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams be given such a complicated department, the Department of Communications, saying that, you know, there are so many challenges, quoting the SABC as well, saying the president could have started her with a much easier department?
I'm not sure if, I'm not sure if there's an easier department. I would like to know.
Challenges are everywhere.
Yes, challenges are everywhere. Remember that when for political heads, for ministers, their role is actually policy. It's policy making and to oversee, political oversight, that the department functions as much as according to the mandate of the ruling party. So the technocrats, they need to remain the bureaucrats that deal with the day-to-day operations of the department. Those are the people that you have to choose very carefully in terms of how do you feel strategic position and whether they develop strategies and performance system that take the department higher. So I think a biggest role beyond the policy oversight, it will be to engage with a variety of stakeholders to make sure that those that have been in the field for a very long time you know, they can give an opinion that can translate into policy and the performance, you know, of the portfolio. I'm not necessarily convinced that, you know, you definitely need someone who has been in cabinet for the last 25 years. I think if she understands that role, that has this policy and oversight and engaging with stakeholders, she can make it. And she has got a proper technical team that deals with managerial and day-to-day operational issues of the department.
All right, we quickly need to go back to Parliament. Abra is standing by with the EFF spokesperson, Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi.
So she cast
Abra?
Hi, studio. Yes, with me right now. Yes?
Yes, you can go ahead.
With me right now, I have Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi of the EFF, who also just ran out of the National Assembly now to come and give us the EFF's response to President Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet reshuffle. Doctor, thank you so much for speaking to us. Off the top of your head, what do you make of this reshuffle?
Well, there's two important developments that really are long overdue. One is what was really an illogical decision by Zuma to separate telecommunications and communications. So the joint of the two is really a welcome development. Makes sense. And that's where we find the SABC. That should be followed by giving a guarantee to the SABC, because if you do not give guarantees to the SABC, it will be a serious crime against our democracy, because the public broadcaster won't be able, as it were, to properly cover the 2019 elections with the type of financial problems that they find themselves. The second one is young blood. So we really welcome the appointment of Stella into the cabinet as a proper minister. It's a statement of confidence to young black women, and we welcome that. But the cabinet is still a bunch of old people whose contribution is really worn out. Batabile Dlamini, why is Batabile Dlamini still there? Why is Nomvula Mokonyane being recycled? She demonstrated serious incompetence in any position that she has been given, let alone the one that she's just vacating as a Minister of Communications. But also she's a person of serious disrepute who has no regard for the Constitution and the rule of law. That is the same with people like Batabile Dlamini. So Ramaphosa is essentially still holding on to questionable characters that makes him to be a person who is really not interested in the affairs of South Africa being ran by people with integrity, who've got the respect to law, but also who are competent. It's full of old people who have been in cabinet, some of them, since 1998, like Naledi Pandor. What is the difference between Naledi Pandor, Jeff Radebe, and presidents in the continent that hold long presidential terms of office, long after they no longer have anything to offer? So it's really a disappointment in that regard.
I would like to throw your question back at you. Why? If I could ask you to speculate, why do you think President Cyril Ramaphosa held on to certain people?
Well, he's a coward. Pravin Gordhan lies to Parliament on two occasions. He lies in relation to the question of the DA as to why, as to whether he met the Guptas or not. He says he didn't meet them. And then he lies in respect of the question of the EFF to him in Parliament as to whether any of the staff members in his department has met the Guptas. In his affidavit to the Zondo Commission, he says that he has, not only has a chief of staff arranged a meeting with AJ, but he himself as the minister was there. And then you retain such a person in Parliament, in a cabinet. He doesn't respect Parliament. He shows arrogance to Parliament. Why would you not move Pravin Gordhan? Why would you not move Batabile Dlamini? Why would you not move Nomvula Mokonyane? Because you are a coward.
Dr. Ndlozi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
That was Mbuyiseni Ndlozi of the EFF. I see we have another MP, Mr. Ngabayomzi Kwankwa of the UDM, who is also going to come give us his response right now. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're alive.
Thank you. Oh, I beg your pardon. Grant me a tone.
Thank you for coming out and speaking to us. So you were in the House when this when the announcement was made. I'm
Correct.
sure that you managed to keep abreast of what was going on.
Yes.
How does the UDM respond to the President's announcement?
Look, there was nothing outstanding about the appointments today. The President decided to miss an opportunity to provide sterling leadership on this issue because in our view, some of the ministers were perennial poor performers in that cabinet should have been removed. One of them is Batabile Dlamini, for instance. We cannot understand why Minister, the one who was in communications, Nomvula Nonkonyane, has been moved to environmental affairs when she does not have a good track record in communications either. But as we say, so we want to take this opportunity to congratulate Stella Ndabeni for being appointed Minister of Communications. I think it's a step in the right direction, trying to make sure that young people are also represented in the cabinet. We're not going to give a blank check, but we are going to support her as long as she does the right things. We think that communications in particular needs a young person with fresh ideas and a fresh approach in terms of implementing the policies of the ANC. That's important. And Minister Kele, the taste of the pudding will be in the eating. We understand that Home Affairs faces a number of challenges. It's come through a very difficult time under the leadership of Minister Gigaba. We hope that you'll be able to turn things around. Telecommunications, the decision to merge it with communications is a rational one. It was a waste of taxpayers' money to create all these ministries that add very little to no value to the South African society. We should be looking to do the same thing to a number of portfolios that were created unnecessarily by the ANC because former President Zuma wanted to reward his cronies. From where we're sitting, the decision to shift Minister Nomvula Nonkonyane to environmental affairs was rewarding bad and poor performance and rewarding mediocrity in our view.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Kwankwa. I have Solly Milatsi of the Democratic Alliance who will now be joining us. You can come through, yes? You can just stand here. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. All your colleagues who've been here before you, they've expressed happiness about the collapsing of the two departments into one, but they've also expressed disappointment about the actual reshuffling. They've mentioned names of certain ministers who they thought were leaving, specifically Minister Mokonyane and Minister Dlamini. Do you share that same view as your colleagues in the House?
Look, absolutely. There was an expectation that the President would show decisive leadership, but this reshuffle is a major disappointment because what we are seeing is basically the recycling of the same old failed ministers from previous department being moved to other departments, and the collapsing or merging of the two departments you are referring to gets overshadowed by the fact that there are still ministers in President Ramaphosa's presidency who have been found by the court to have lied, who have been found on numerous terms to have not acted ethically, and the fact that they still remain in cabinet today remains one of the biggest disappointment because he has had an opportunity time and again to chuck them out of cabinet. But you know, we understand that his priority is balancing the different factions in the ANC, but that comes at a great cost to service delivery and good governance and accountability.
One of the MPs who stood here, they said they doubted whether the new communications minister, Minister Ndabeni Abrams, would be up to the task of handling this very important portfolio. She is young. It is a department, and when I say she's young, I mean it as a good thing because it's part of the generational mix. It is, however, a really difficult department to get your grips into. How do you think she'll fare in this role?
Look, serving in government, if you are competent and you are ethical, there shouldn't be anything difficult about it. You know, I think her appointment, again, the president had to consider, you know, pleasing the old ANC Youth League guard, you know, but be that as it might be, the proof will be in the pudding for her.
So you also said earlier on that Cyril Ramaphosa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, he's balancing certain forces. Is that still a big thing within the party, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. This reshuffle shows exactly it. You know, we know why there's fears around taking action against Batabile Dlamini because she represents a very powerful bloc of the ANC Women's League. But that, again, that's what constrains the ability of this government to deliver because what takes priority is factional interest rather than what's in the best interest of good governance and service delivery.
Sorry, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming down to speak to us. Let me just check. Oh, yes, I have the NFP with me right now. Professor Nhlanhla Kubisa.
Yes,
I'm not sure where I'm supposed to stand and where you're supposed to stand. Do you want to swap? We should swap. Do you want to?
We're going to swap this up.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Prof, you've just done out of the National Assembly, but you do know what the announcement
Yes,
is about?
I
No,
do.
this way,
I
this
do.
way?
I do.
You come closer?
Closer. Okay.
Yes. How do you feel about President Ramaphosa's cabinet reshuffle this afternoon?
Well, there is nothing robust, there is nothing radical in the reshuffle. We've seen old people taken to other portfolios, and I think President Ramaphosa is rather very cautious. It seems he's dealing with the factions within the ANC, and he doesn't want to bring about a lot of reshuffling at this point in time. Of course, one would say it's a bit cosmetic, but the country out there needs people of competence, integrity, and people who deliver to the masses of our people. That's all that the people are waiting for. And it seems to me that the cabinet is still bloated, although President Ramaphosa said this is merely the genesis of it. But of course, the NFP wants to congratulate Ms. Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. She's still young. I think President Ramaphosa is trying by all means to come with that generational mix, but we will say that one is a step in the right direction, where you bring in young people to cabinet, people with skills. But what the public needs out there is competence, integrity, professionalism. People deliver to the masses of our people because of high unemployment, poverty. That's all that we need within the country. But we want to congratulate the young lady for being elevated to the position of being a Minister of Communications. It's now one department. We are waiting for more departments to be realigned and reconfigured, as he promised at the beginning when he was delivering the State of the Nation address.
Prof, thank you so much for speaking to us today. Thank you. With me, I have the IFP's Nkhululeko Hlengwa. Sorry about that. Thank you for speaking to us today. You've heard what your colleague just said. Everybody is going on about the communications department, the collapse, and of course the new minister. First, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I want to congratulate Ms. Stella on her appointment. I believe that she's got a mammoth task on her hands, given the fact that she has to now merge two departments. But of course, she has been in this sector ever since she was appointed onto the national executive, and so one believes that she's got a good footing on the good grounding for that. Of course, the narrative that youth is now in the national executive does fall away, with all due respect, because Stella's not below the age of 35, and secondly is because the ANC doesn't have anybody who's youth in parliament, so the president's choice was rather limited in that regard as well. But having said that, the president has missed an opportunity to actually walk his talk. The so-called new dawn has become a sunset that we are used to from the ANC, given the fact that he spoke about generational mix, he spoke about a new sort of approach in his introduction to this reshuffle. One expected a thunderous shake-up, and it didn't happen. The president missed the opportunity precisely because he's actually managing and balancing the warring factions within the ANC. Can he explain why the ministers who should have gone are still there? Minister Batabile Dlamini, Mr. Nomvula Mokonyan, amongst others. He can't explain it. Safe to say that had he dared to touch Minister Batabile Dlamini, albeit the findings that are against him, he would have been at the receiving end in the backlash of the Women's League, and he does not want to go to an election with that kind of trouble within the ANC. So the IFP believes that this reshuffle was not in the collective interests of the country, but in the collective interests of the ANC's own unity. Of course, we must congratulate the new ministers and hope that they will execute their new duties and responsibilities to the best of their abilities. Safe to say, though, what we saw today was not a reshuffle, but the recycling of the old. It's the same people who have collapsed the economy. It's the same people who have been unable to create jobs. It's the same people who aided and abetted state capture. And en masse, they all remain in office, and the president seems to be aiding and abetting that kind of incompetence by actually not manning up and not stepping up to the plate to actually deal decisively with incompetent ministers.
So do you think that Home Affairs is not in a very good space with its new minister there, or do you think that he might make a difference?
Well, we can only wish him the best, Minister Kwele, and hope that he will actually take the department forward and sort out the problems that are there. He comes in at a time when the tourism is still affected by the behavior of the past minister, of course. And so he's actually landed with a very big problem. The issues of access for the majority of our people, particularly in rural areas, to the services of Home Affairs remains a problem. And me knowing him to be a rural boy, I'm sure he's going to have that close to heart. And secondly, the fact that the services at Home Affairs continue to be inconsistent with global standards, the failure to bring in new scientific, technological and innovative ideas to manage the population register and so on are cause for concern. But what is fundamental is that it's not a case of the minister. It's the fact that the entire cabinet in itself is compromised because in the main, all the individuals that were there aided and abetted state capture. They aided and abetted the President Jacob Zuma's behavior in terms of how he handled the affairs of the country. And so there's very little trust that we can actually have in any of the individuals who currently occupy office. And the only way for them to redeem themselves is to present themselves to the Commission of State Capture of Inquiry so that they can actually explain their own involvement and their own actions, but secondly, actually do their job. What we see now is just niceties, it's pleasantries, and people are just not pulling their weight. And the president failed dismally today to stamp his authority and to actually bring the new dawn to life. So the IFP takes very little comfort out of today's developments because we fundamentally believe that it's still the same choir singing the same hymn.
Thank you so much for your time. That was the view of the IFP. I now have with me the FF Plus, Dr. Kunain Mulder. Thank you for speaking with us. My cameraman's giving us directions over here. It seems to be the same narrative across all the opposition parties thus far, all singing from the same hymn book. Yes. You're on the same page as them?
Yes, if I was a rhino, I would not sleep very well tonight. I don't think that the minister being appointed now to environmental affairs can do the job. She's not cabinet material. She shouldn't be there. I think one should take into consideration that the president's, the cabinet reshuffle was not a voluntary exercise. He was forced to do that. He was forced because of the death of one of his cabinet colleagues and because the other one had to resign. So if he could choose, I think he would not have changed the cabinet at all. So his hand was forced in that sense. But if you look at what happened, it's a non-event. Yes, some positives can be taken. The fact that some departments were merged, that's a good step. Maybe that we will see more of that after the election. But I think the high point to a certain extent is that Batabile Dlamini survived another cabinet reshuffle. We'll see how long that will last. But for the rest, Stella is a good appointment. She'll bring some new energy to the Department of Communications, the new merged department. But in general, it's a symptom of what's happening in politics. I believe the president is not in charge of his own party at this stage. I think he hopes to come out of the election with a stronger mandate, and then only then he will be able to appoint his own team that he would like to see. In the meantime, we are just going through the motions, I think.
Dr. Mulder, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Much.
Thank you. Well, we don't have anybody else lined up at the moment. We are still waiting for one or two other MPs. We have made calls to the ANC, the chief whip of the ANC in Parliament, Jackson Tembe. We are still waiting to see if he will be joining us to give his reaction as well. But for now, that's all that we have for you. Back to you in the studio.
All right, many thanks there to our reporter, Abra Babia, of course, reporting live from Parliament, giving us that reaction from different political parties, opposition parties, of course. So looking at some points, the first one, it looks like Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams is joining the support of many political parties, a whole lot of them saying it's a great appointment. And it really doesn't leave us surprised because she's been member of Parliament from 2009.
Look, for me, I think the interesting part is that it possibly shows the maturity of the opposition, that where they appreciate a move even by the ruling party, they are willing to come out and...
Well, I think it's the only thing that they appreciated to the
remember also that when President Cyril Ramaphosa took over as the state president, they also showed some serious goodwill towards him. But they also made it clear that, once you start working, then we will deal. But for now, they gave him some kind of a welcoming gesture. So I think, for me, it shows the maturity of the opposition to express themselves the way that they did on this one. And the second thing, I think they across the board, I think they are saying that the president was in his reshuffling, he was equally more concerned about management of the internal differences within the ANC.
Is it the case, though? Because I wanted to come to that point.
Yeah, you remember when we started, we did mention that he has to balance issues of integrity, governance, clean government, and performance issues, but also make sure that it doesn't ruffle feathers within the tripartite alliance. So I think they have a point in terms of indicating that he had to strike, you know, that balance.
Because part of what they're saying is they're surprised that the president kept Nomvula Mkonyane as a minister, and some analysts are of the view that this is one person who's got a great mobilizing capacity when it comes to mobilizing for the elections.
More especially, definitely, she's very, very good when it comes to electioneering. You know, the president needs a person of Nomvula's caliber when we'll be mobilizing towards the election with assisting your Figile Mbalula and others. So she's got that strength, and she's well supported by the masses. So the president needed someone like that. And obviously, as much as Batabile has become some kind of a deficit for the ANC, but they need her because of the constituency brings in the Women's League. So he wouldn't like to affect that. It's just the matter of crystallizing and consolidating what he has until the election, just to continue with this transition or transitional cabinet. Once the elections are over, then you'll see the wholesale or the complete new cabinet that he will bring in. The people will be fresh. Of course, yes, now that with your Stella and Dawena coming in, there will be that continuity as well from there. But there will definitely a lot of people that will be cut after that.
And you have Corneille Mulder from the Freedom Front Plus who says, if I were a rhino, I wasn't going to sleep well tonight.
Well, I think that statement is his expression of no confidence on the Minister Mkonyane to lead that environmental portfolio appropriately. It's just that he put it in a very interesting...
Yeah.
But I think what Majola is saying is it's equally important. I think for now what we are seeing, it's still some kind of a transitional cabinet as far as Ramaphosa is concerned.
So the real cabinet is still coming after the elections?
The real Ramaphosa cabinet, it's still coming. But having said that, it will not be completely his own volition. He still has to engage with the tripartite alliance and the various, groupings within the ANC that constantly contest for power.
Let's just talk about what many political parties were complaining about. In Mbuyiseni Ndlozi of the EFF saying that it is a bunch of old perennial people who've been recycled back into cabinet. So they've been concerns really, even from the ANC itself, from young leaders like Ronald Lamola in Nasrec, basically complaining that young people are not necessarily being given the space to lead.
Well, the Minister of Finance has echoed those sentiments several times, domestically and continentally. Tito Mboweni has also raised those issues. Look, from an analytical point, it's a difficult one to reflect on, because there's also the question of ageism. You also don't want a sense that some people are being overlooked on the basis of their age when they feel like they are still energetic enough to do. But if you are going to talk about the generational mix, it then means the ANC Youth League itself must step up to the plate. Without that necessary, it then becomes a popcorn approach. It just comes up from time to time. But unless if the ANC revives, the ANC Youth League, and then there's a sense that this ANC Youth League is a very strong necessary ground for emerging leaders.
Is the question here not the availability of such individuals to lead from the ANC Youth League? Because that's what IFP leader Hleko was saying, that it simply shows that there is no pool of young leaders within the ANC.
I'm not convinced that there are no young leaders who can step up.
Well, they
to the
are, because
plate.
the ANC Youth League is there.
They are,
but the caliber.
And in any event, they don't have to be simply limited to the ANC. I mean, there's nothing that stops the president from taking someone young from the DA, for example, or from the EFF, or from the... There's nothing that stops the president from doing that. I think what is probably missing is that strong youth sector mobilizing effect and a forum where young people showcase their ability to lead and be taken serious. I'm not convinced that, you know, when it comes to young people, there is a very powerful youth, you know, structure and a forum that can highlight, you know, that leadership. But I think capable young leaders are there. Okay. They just need a forum to be seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about President Ramaphosa's leadership style, not just with this particular reshuffling of cabinet, but also the changes that he's made at state-owned entities, for example. What does that say about his leadership style? Is he decisive?
He is decisive, but at some time he's too cautious. You know, he tried very careful whenever he makes decision. You remember how swiftly he has moved with the SARS saga. He has really moved very swiftly there with the Tomoyane thing. The way he dealt with your ESCOM and other SOEs. So he moved. Yes, yeah, he moved very swiftly. But here, because the situation is a bit complex within the ANC, he must be decisive, but at the same time, he must take into cognizance the dynamics and the complexities within the ANC. He doesn't want to affect. He doesn't want to, as Dumsan was saying very correctly, that he wants to change, but at the same time he wants to maintain this unity project in the renewal.
But does it not compromise what he believes in?
It does. It does at some level, as long as he does that with his conviction, because obviously as a leader he must have some conviction that, okay, I'm doing this, like as we've said before, at the moment this is just a transitional cabinet, and I know that within few months time, and then already I'm sure in his mind, his picture, he's got that picture of the future in terms of where he wants to take the ANC and the company, or rather the country forward, that who he wants to work with, because great leaders will do that. They will create that picture of the future to say that how I want the future to look like, who I want to work with, how I want to, in terms of the strategy that I will put there. So already now, really it's about the future. Unfortunately, that will affect his electioneering, because oppositional parties are still going to hammer on Batabiles, on Mvulas and all those, to say that you are scared, you are coward, you failed to remove Batabile.
All right, I'm going to give you a 10 to respond to President Ramaphosa's leadership style, but we quickly need to go to our senior reporter Mzwandile Mbeja, who of course has been covering the state capture inquiry, but we joining him now to get more reaction, of course, on this cabinet. Mzwai, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. What has the reaction been there at the state capture inquiry?
Oh, well, as you can imagine, when the president announced those minor changes to his cabinet, it was in session, so there wouldn't be a number of people who really would have known until the commission has concluded. But obviously there were those, because now we live in the world of Twitter, Facebook, social media. So as much as the commission was continuing with its work, and we were able really to see what exactly was happening, I think the sense that many people got, the sense that I got from many people here, I mean some of them fellow journalists, was that well, maybe the president should have just released a statement, because they had been hyped up to believe that there would be this massive cabinet changes. And interestingly, there's not even a single minister that lost his or her job. I mean, this is a cabinet reshuffle really occasioned by events perhaps beyond the control of everyone. So very interesting mainly from fellow colleagues here who are here in numbers, who said, well, given that it was only 3 changes, maybe he should have just released the statement, Palisa.
All right. Well, back to the inquiry, of course. Today we've seen the former Director General at the Department of Treasury, Lungisa Fuzile, continuing with his testimony. Let's just reflect back on what transpired today and, of course, what is expected to happen tomorrow on Friday.
Well, the former DG has just concluded. He actually went beyond the time that was allocated. So we were supposed to finish at 4 o'clock and then we couldn't. In fact, there was a thought that perhaps the proceedings could be concluded from the former DG by lunchtime, so that the current DG, Dondo Mohajane, could take the stand. But given the nature and the details, really, and the explaining of how the processes were working, so it went until very, very late. So it only concluded now after 4:30. But the former DG, Lungisa Fuzile, has concluded. So basically the thrust really of his evidence here, Palisa, is that there was an elaborate plan to capture treasury, because the manner in which the people who were introduced to this department, the manner in which they went about interacting with the rest of the staff, so it was very clear that they had a mandate. He recounted his first meeting with Minister Des van Rooyen when he had just been appointed, basically saying to him, maybe it would be important for him to meet with the former minister Ndlandlanene so that they could do a handover, but he says the minister was not interested. And then fast forward to next day, when it was the time for the swearing-in ceremony at the union buildings. So he says when he got there at the union buildings, he met someone that he had never met before, who introduced himself to the former DG as Mohamed Popat. And then he says he introduced himself as the special advisor to the new minister. So he says he was really surprised, because he is the one who is supposed to actually sign off the contracts of the advisors. So basically those were some of the issues really that cropped up. And then the day after the swearing-in ceremony, so when the minister now was in the offices and he needed to introduce his advisors to the staff, he spoke about something which was very, very interesting, Palisa, because he said when they were in the office of the minister, remember the minister had come with his advisors, so he says the DG got in there were 3 people, obviously together with the minister. So as the minister was introducing them, so in terms of their roles, he mixed them up. So saying this one is the chief of staff and this one is the special advisor, but was corrected by the Mr. Popat that he had met at the union building. So, and that led him to start connecting the dots. Remember when he got that call from Enoch Kotongwane after Minister Nen had been fired to say, you are now going to get a Gupta minister. He will come with his advisors that he doesn't even know. So basically those are some of the stories really, Palisa, that he was telling here, saying, and there were a lot of things that were happening in the treasury, so which made it very, very difficult for them to work together. Even the issue of the handover, he said Minister Des van Rooyen instructed him to give him a handover report, to which he said he objected because he had suggested that it be done together with Minister Nene, but Minister van Rooyen was not interested. So in short, though that was the thrust of really the evidence, he was basically saying the people who had been appointed to come and run treasury, so they had come with a mandate really to capture the treasury.
All right, our reporter there, Mzwandile Mbeje, reporting live from Parktown at the State Capture Inquiry, of course, updating us on what transpired today. The former DG at National Treasury, Lungisa Fuzilo, of course, wrapping up his testimony at the inquiry. Just before I wrap up with my guests here in studio, let us once again take a look at your tweets, what you have to say on the cabinet reshuffle announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier. Masakala saying that he welcomes the appointment of Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. He thinks it's a good move. Also, the measure of the two departments makes sense. As for Batabile, I think she will be reshuffled only after the elections. The next one from Tami Chabalala. Let's hope that the following departments will also be merged next year: Environmental Affairs, Water and Sanitation and Tourism, the Department of DTI, Economic Development and Small Businesses, Social Development, Women, Children and People with Disabilities as well. And I think that is part of what you were saying earlier on, that some departments will have to be merged after the elections. Before we come to that, one more tweet from Chris, who says, this has proven that this is not the government of the people, by the people. It is the government of the ANC, by the ANC. Numzana saying, all right, I wanted to take a look at the final tweet, but okay, it came off. Nonetheless, the measure of other departments, of course, it makes sense, doesn't it?
I think there are too many great analysts out there.
South Africa is bright, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, I actually agree with that tweet, that I think there's a lot of measures that need to be done. And I think one that was not mentioned in that tweet, and I agree with that tweet, I think one that was not mentioned is in the office of the president, there is another department called the Department of what
planning.
Is it called?
Is it planning and monitoring?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not convinced from my style of governments that it needs to exist as a department. But what they possibly need to do is to revive the policy unit. So if they revive the policy unit, they should be able to generate and coordinate policies across government.
But is it not the department that's responsible for the NDP? That planning and monitoring?
No, but you see, you remember that the NDP is supposed to be this overarching program of government. So you don't necessarily need a separate entity. Because once you do that, it means the other departments are likely to wash their hands to say that, look, this is not our thinking, this belongs to the NDP, whatever department that they will call it. So what you definitely want to do is to make sure that all the planning is mainstreamed across department. It is and the actual performance assessment is across, so that you don't lock it. It's like the danger of locking programs on women empowerment into one department. Because what you need is to make sure that each and every department has programs for women, and there's budget, and there's management of performance on those issues. So I wouldn't be surprised if after the next election that department vanishes and is replaced by a much stronger policy and coordination unit in the presidency.
All right. So
I agree. I agree with the merging of the departments, except that DTI. DTI is very big. It's the second largest department of the Treasury, so you cannot match that that department. But your economic development and the small business, yes, you can match them. Before, you remember that even the minerals and energy, they were merged. Obviously, depending if the Ramaphosa really would like to go back to that, or he still wants to keep them separately. But indeed, the other one, your environmental, water and sanitation, I think you could measure. At some stage, your science, arts,
science and technology,
they were also amalgamated. So I think there's a huge...
And high-end basic education.
Yes. But I think that was a great move to separate that one, so that we could concentrate on the education, to have the basic education, because it was swallowed by the higher education. So there's a lot of preparations and a lot of consultations before the elections to say, how are we going to amalgamate this what you call department. So what is happening with the president now, or what should be happening, is that by now he should be really having a clear that destination. Where does he want to take this country to? You know, where is the destination? So that is a where. The question that he should be answering now, it's a where. Obviously, that will involve the economic growth, the unemployment one, the poverty alleviation, the crime, and all those
well,
things.
Economically, I think we do know where he's, you know, heading
yes,
to, because
he has started very well,
plans
absolutely,
and investments
yes,
and so on.
Yeah.
But one of the tweets to me, son, one of our viewers is saying that the changes simply reflects that this government is that of the ANC, for the ANC, not the government of the people, by the people.
Yeah, that's a very creative reflection. But I think it's also a factor that the ANC won a popular vote. So they can, given that they were given that vote, that mandate by the larger junction of the electorate, they can legitimately claim that they are representing, you know, the people. But I think from a citizen perspective, it's not so much the vote at the end of the day that counts, but whether as a citizen one is getting the due services that any government should be delivering to its citizen. So I suspect that tweet is a reflection of a frustration of a citizen that feels like I have a government that is not necessarily catering for me.
I wanted to ask if that is a reflection of what is likely to transpire at the elections. We heard the head of elections, Fikile Mbalula, saying that we've seen some polls that are saying that the ANC will be on a decline next year after the elections. So should they be worried?
Well, they should be worried because remember that since I think they didn't do pretty well in the last election. I mean, they almost lost Gauteng. They almost lost two economic hubs in the country. And once the ruling party loses Gauteng and the Western Cape, it has technically become a rural party. So that they definitely, you know, should be worried about, you know, the polls. But the answer is not simply on convincing the voters, but it's on delivering on the mandate that any ruling party is given.
All right. If you have just joined us, welcome to your story. Let's just recap the changes that were made earlier by President Cyril Ramaphosa and his cabinet. The former Communications Minister, Nomvula Mkonyane, is the new Minister for the Department of Environmental Affairs. The former Minister of Telecommunications and Postal Services, Siyabonga Kwele, is the now Minister of Home Affairs, and the Deputy Minister of Postal Services, that's the former, of course, she's now the Minister of Communications, and of course that is Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. So those are the changes that have been effected by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And of course we've also seen the measure of the Department of Communications and the Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services. Many people saying that it's a good move. I've heard my producers now, you know, saying that please ask your analysts what might have motivated this move. We've had the president, of course, saying that that is, you know, to better align their plans, especially moving towards the fourth industrial revolution.
You see, the current trends in government structuring, functioning throughout the world is on the functions rather than, you know, territorial identities. So it is functions that determine how the government performs, it sets up its systems and all of that. And if you consider this portfolio, that is practically about communications and the leading role that, you know, technological communication plays in facilitating government and the relationship between government and its people, domestically and internationally, then it makes sense on a functionality basis. Some will say, for example, that in what President Zuma did when he started over was to create entities that will cater for the people that assisted him to the throne in Polokwane. Now, what you need to do to make sure that you have a functioning government is to structure a government according to the functions that this government. So those functions that seem related or aligned, you group them together and make sure there's proper integration and coordination. So my assumption is that it's the functionality of this aspect that could have motivated the president to merge them.
And then I wanted to hear your take on President Ramaphosa's leadership style, looking at the changes effected today and the changes that he's made before at state-owned entities.
For me, I think he has got two elements.
Okay.
One, I think he has adopted the Mandela approach, which is consensus-driven. But you see, the problem is that he doesn't have the luxury of Mandela, because Mandela had the time. For him, he takes over a country which is practically in a socio-economic crisis. So he has to make decisions and get things going. So that's number one. I think so the consensus, it's a good thing, but it's also a very risky for a society that needs, you know, decision, like Bush would have said, decision point in his book. And then the second thing, I think his approach, he's a process man. He's a process, he's a systems man, he's a governance man. He wants to reach, by the time he reaches the decisions, he wants to say that I followed all the necessary processes and procedures that are required in this regard. This is why most of the decisions that he takes, he actually steps back. So if there's take for example in the, where's that province? Northwest province.
Northwest province.
When they dissolved that PEC, it's not a Cyril Ramaphosa decision. So he comes up and says the NEC has decided the following, simply because he lays emphasis. If you look at the changes that he's putting through state-owned enterprises, there's a whole rate of commissions there. So he dismisses Moyane after saying, I got a recommendation from the New Den Commission that says, you know, you must go. Similarly, with Transnet, there were certain processes that, you know, led into the departure of Siyabonga Kam. So he is not the type of a political leader in the mold of George Bush or Trump, what I call a cowboy style of a leader. You got into the saddle and you start cracking the whip. He operated through this system such that when the decision is actually made, there's a whole of processes and systems and collective that would have participated in that, which does not necessarily put him in the firing line simply because there were processes that were followed.
All right. Your final words, Dr. Majola.
Yes, I mean, we congratulate and commend the president. Obviously, as we've been saying, that especially with the appointment of Stella in terms of gender and the generational mix, yeah, as I've said earlier on, I still feel that he could have really been bold enough in terms of crafting the future and showing people what we must expect after the election.
But
in
is
terms
an opportunity missed? Or we can still make up for this after the elections?
Well, South Africans are very impatient, unfortunately, because of what has happened in the last couple of years. They want to see things happening now, but unfortunately for him, as a president and as a leader, he must also be cautious, because he needs to take cognizance of many factors within the party and also in the broader society. So well done to him, and then we hope that he will be able to bring the whole country into his confidence and show them what he's up to for the next election.
All right. Just before, I know I said it was your final words, but we need to quickly go back to Parliament, where our reporter is standing by. Abra, you're standing by with the Chief Whip of the African National Congress, Jackson Temu. The ANC was supposed to have had a media briefing regarding the state capture inquiry, but of course it was cancelled due to this particular cabinet reshuffle. Talk to us about that.
Indeed, we are going to be speaking with the Chief Whip right now, and let me put the question to him. I was told you don't normally respond to cabinet reshuffles because these are usual things, but I would like to know, what is your reaction to the President's announcement earlier today?
Well, we really welcome the shifting of Comrade Siyabonga Cwele to Home Affairs and shifting of Comrade Nomvula Mokonyane to Environmental Affairs. Of course, I think everybody is excited that there is now a new minister, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. As we all know, she has been around the block for quite some time. She has been a deputy minister for a long time. So we want to congratulate her for being appointed a minister now. Of course, also what is worth also congratulating the president about is the merging of the two departments of communications and telecommunication and postal services into one department, because that's quite clear that President Ramaphosa is indeed truthful to his commitment to the nation, that he would like to make the cabinet smaller. So he has started, he's walking the talk, and we are quite convinced that when we come back after winning the next elections next year, we are quite convinced that President Cyril Ramaphosa will then even make his cabinet smaller than it is now, having started on this journey with the merging of the two departments.
Chief Whip, now I don't know if you saw on social media early on, commentators and citizens actually drew up a wish list of how they would like, what kind of changes they would like to see in the cabinet coming from today's announcement. And every single opposition party who I had here before you said that while they welcomed the changes which we saw today, they were disappointed that certain ministers remained behind, specifically Minister Mkhonyane and also Minister Batabile Dlamini. They all speculated on why they thought the president had to retain these ministers, saying that that's due to ANC factional battles. How do you respond to that?
By the way, that's the problem with opposition. When they are having their eye on an election campaign, they will then try to even rubbish a very good president, Cyril Ramaphosa. If our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, I will not bring any new people in now with an election in the horizon or in the eve of an election. It will not make any sense. So he has done very well by just changing the decks or the chairs in the decks and then bringing a new minister who was a deputy minister. Not bring anybody from outside, because you stand also a risk if you bring new people, a risk of what happens if those people new that you have brought in do not make it in the ANC list process that is underway as we speak now. So the best thing that any person with some little bit of intelligence, and I think if the opposition had some little bit of intelligence, they will know that just before 6 months before an election, it's just not worth it to bring new people. You work with what you have so that after the elections, it will then up to the president to decide how small his cabinet should be, and secondly, what is the generational mix that he has started now with the appointment of Comrade Stella Beni and many others. Kopai are there. So, but of course, we need more young people in the cabinet space. So I'm quite confident that the president is fully aware of this, that he will make his promise of firstly making the cabinet smaller, but secondly ensuring that the cabinet has also more of young people so that they represent the youth in this Republic of South Africa. So I'm not worried about the opposition. What would you expect from an opposition party 6 months or 3 months before an election? They are electioneering. They are full of political opportunism. That's why they will say anything and everything, including finding fault with a president who says something that is incorrect in parliament and on his own corrects it. Under normal circumstances, nobody would find fault with a correction of something wrong that was said in parliament. But with an election on the horizon, people will jump into the bandwagon and try to throw as much mud as possible to the person of the president of the Republic and the president of the ANC. So we're not worried at all.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. That was the views of the ANC in Parliament, represented by ANC Chief Whip Jackson Tembu. Back to you in the studio.
All right, many thanks there once again to our reporter, Abra. And I just want your departing shots, really. This time, I promise, these are your final words. So The ANC Chief Whip, Jackson Mthembu, really echoing your sentiments on hoping for a smaller cabinet after the elections next year, and basically saying that what the oppositions are saying on Nomvula Mkonyan and Batabile Dlamini, it's just part of electioneering.
Well, there's no, I would assume that there's no politician right now who is not in an electioneering mood. I mean...
So it's part of the game?
Yeah, no, it's part of the game. So I would have expected him in that position to say, you know, something to that effect. But he also mentions an interesting point that, you know, it doesn't make sense to bring in a whole lot of new people now before an election. But you know, when it comes to performance of government, whether it's 2 days before the election, that performance must be maintained at the highest standard. So my assumption would be that if you had a very strong center within the ruling party, it's immaterial whether you bring in a new minister 5 days before the election or 3 months or 2 years before, because the center is strong and it can hold its deployees, you know, accountable. So it's not, maybe it's not a time issue. It's about what are the mechanisms to hold the deployees accountable. That matters.
All right, so basically the ANC is not organized to be able to do that.
It can do better.
It can do better.
Well, the ANC is an organization, and any organization grows like a human being. There is birth, there is growth, and there is death. Between birth and death, there are so many things that will take place during the growth process. Someone will get tired, will get sick, will be healthy, will be fine. So during that time, while we are sick, of course, yes, you will try to recuperate from that sickness. So what we see now in the ANC, I can say that they're in that process, they're in that stage. ANC is in the ICU phase. They are recuperating from the ICU. So once they are recuperating, and then now they need to show that we are a healthy organization now. We can deliver which will be characterized by competency, performance, service delivery. People want to see things happening. And also performance must be accompanied by accountability, by ethical leadership. All those things must be put together. So it's very important for ANC leaders not to of course, as they must defend themselves, but at some stage they must be able to acknowledge that, yeah, we are recuperating. We had a very difficult 10 years or so, and then now we are putting things together so that people will vote for them.
All right, listen, we could talk the whole day, and that's where we'll leave it for today. Luckily, the cabinet was reshuffled during the day, so we didn't have to wake you up in the middle of the night. Thank you so much for coming through. Thank you so much indeed. Well, Dr. Mazuma Jola is a leadership expert from Worldwide Institute of Leadership and Development, and we also had Dumisani Hlope. He's our SABC political editor, analyzing the cabinet reshuffle, but most importantly, politics and governance here in South Africa. We're taking a quick break here on Your Story. There is still so much more to come.